Hello, I'm Jonathan Bowman-Perks and welcome to my favourite time of the week. I'm delighted to be with Alistair Kett, who is an old friend who I've known for about 20 years actually, and it's a good catch-up time. Alistair is a very successful partner in PwC, PwC, and we're here in their offices right now. And Alistair and I first knew each other in about 2000, where we were both working in PwC, and we formed a thing called the Mufti Club, which was for ex-forces people out of uniform. Mufti was an Indian term for civilian clothes. And we had a lot of fun, isn't it?
Indeed, good fun.
It was a nice way to collaborate. And Alistair's had a great career. Before that, he was a very successful British Army Officer in the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, finishing up as the adjutant of his battalion, which is a great role to have. And then British Airways was lucky enough to get him to go and work for them, project managing for about 18 months. And from there, a natural step into PwC doing project management in the industrial side. And Alistair was picked up, they realised his talents, and for the last 20 years he's been with them. A variety of different roles, but particularly he did a stint as a partner, got a partner at a young age, out in the Middle East, doing some fascinating work, which we're going to talk about in Inspiring Leadership Extra in the session after this. But Alistair, over to you. Talk to me a bit about who you found inspiring, or you talked a bit about inspiring leadership, what it means for you, and that kind of stuff.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here today. It's a pleasure. It's lovely to catch up again as well. I think the real benefit of doing a job like the one that I do is that you get a really broad range of views of different organisations and different people, and therefore you see leadership in its multitude of formats. And we all come at this through the lens of our own experience. So, what does good leadership mean for one individual versus another? And I know what works for me, and I've seen what works for others as well. There are some changing themes around leadership as society evolves. We were talking about millennials earlier and different leadership, but I do think there are some constants as well. So those individuals that I've worked with that have really inspired me, they do show some common traits. There are some characteristics that I think just pass through time, and really the one that does jump to mind, and I know we've talked about this, is this concept of authenticity. Just the real person coming to work, showing their vulnerabilities, showing their foibles, showing what they need to get done, and how the individuals that they're leading can play a part in enabling that. That for me is just the sort of core foundation. I remember some years ago a friend of mine called me up and he said, he rang up and said, Al, I hate my job and I hate myself for doing it. I was like, why? What's going on? He said, well, I've just walked into a meeting and my boss has stood in front of me and said, it's a very exciting time in the frozen food industry. and he just said, I don't believe him. I don't believe it's an exciting time. And for that sort of moment, you realise that you're operating in a sort of bit of a theatre that I've described it as. And when you're being led, if you're being led by an authentic individual that really just shows you who they are and what works for them, I just think it makes it a bit easier. People feel more comfortable. The counter, of course, is where you are operating in an environment where you don't have that authentic leadership, that authentic individual. It becomes quite toxic quite quickly, and you can see issues of trust, misaligned goals, ambiguity, the fog that you have to operate in business. Everyone wants precision, but what's that great line? If you chase precision, you capture excellence or something. There's something in that. But if you can accept that there's going to be a level of fog, that needs to be sort of tempered by the fact that an ambiguous leader, a leader that's not showing authenticity, they can create that fog to the point that people really can't see what they're doing, and that's not a great experience. So for me, operating with people that just bring themselves to work, show what they need to do, that's the main point.
I think that's a really well put, and I've just realised how we're doing for time. We're doing just fine. We were talking also about white-collar psychopaths in business. Yes, and right. What's been your experience of that? Because it's a changing thing that's going on, really.
It is changing, and society's moving quite quickly in that space. I think as a leader, you can find it can be quite lonely, right? There's no question that the requirements to make decisions and the pressure to do that can be quite lonely, and sometimes you can find yourself in the dark, right? That's metaphorically. A really good friend of mine once, some years ago, said to me, look, if you're going to operate in the dark, make sure your moral compass has a backlight. And I thought that was a nice phrase, nice thing to sort of come back on. And I think that this issue around white collar psychopaths, it's about that the direction of travel in the way that you work with people. You can be direct, you can be very clear in your ambitions, you can be very clear on what you need to get done. But if your moral compass wavers too far and you move towards the bullying or the aggression or the self-serving behaviours, it's not going to stand up in the next generation of leadership. And those that have demonstrated it in all sorts of industries, as we've seen in most recent press, it's not acceptable. The skill that I think our next generation need to really focus on is EQ, emotional intelligence, right? And if that's underpinned by some moral coefficient, then they're going to be good leaders, and it's going to work.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And you got partner at a very early age. I mean, I think it was 2008, wasn't it?
That's right.
You were partner, which is incredibly impressive. I mean, you went to the junior division of Staff College, which is like the young sort of up and coming stars. You were one of the youngest, a couple of people there, and came out very successfully from that course in the top couple. So you've always been successful and doing things on the leading edge of things, or the bleeding edge, as they call it. What do you think? You talked about, I love that idea, you talked about the triangle of making partnership in a professional services firm. What is it that the things you have to bear in mind for those who want to go for a partnership or a promotion to managing director?
I think it's about, and thank you for your kind words about success. It doesn't always feel like that, of course, from where you're sitting. But the truth is, and anyone that's worked with me will have heard this over and over again, I try and put three elements together in any sort of commercial or working environment. And those elements are what I call the beast. Theatre and real world.
I love that, beast, theatre and real world.
And it works, right? Yeah. And beast is the mandatory production of information, the reporting, the collation of data, the writing of proposals, all the stuff that needs to get done, right? The real world is actually out typically selling or delivering client value or making sure that your purpose as a business is really being tangibly delivered to the wider society. And then the third bit is theatre. Yeah. And theatre is the bit that wraps around the spin and the positioning. And at any stage in your career, you need to work out what balance of those three components is important. But it is always an element of those three. I think that you see so many people who are fantastic at the beast or the machine, they can just produce, but they don't progress beyond a certain point because they just
crank
do that.
The handle, they just turn it,
and they're very
it's transactional.
It's transactional.
And they haven't worked out relationships and stakeholder management.
Exactly that. And people will use them. And then you see people who really focus on theatre. And at some point they get found out because there is no real world behind them. Yeah. And my focus, I've always tried to focus on real world. I think that if you have a suitable background and foundation in delivering value for your clients, whatever it is, you then have to work out how best to play those other two.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
The beast, theatre and real world.
That's right.
Yeah. And it is really important that you have there's a little bit of the actor, darling, in everybody, but not in an inauthentic way. It's a bit about exciting people, but not inauthentically saying I'm really excited to be in frozen foods.
Yeah, that's right.
No, nothing wrong with being in frozen foods. I was just with a client who does work in frozen foods. But then just the last couple of minutes. I'm just looking at the time. Yeah, just the last couple of minutes. Your top tip. I did like your top tip. Do you want to share your top tip with?
I'll be delighted to. So I think that whenever you're in any sort of leadership position role, either for yourself or for others, it's really important to remember that whilst there's so much written about, you've got to be positive, you've got to be authentic. I always come back to the point that you have choice. And making a really tangible acknowledgement that you can choose. There's nobody else making that decision for you. You can choose how to interact with people, what decisions to make, whether or not you want to try something new. If you can remind yourself that you have that choice on a regular basis, I think it just makes it easier to be a potentially more successful leader.
Yeah, great. Alistair, fantastic.
Not at all.
Lovely being with you.
Thank
you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.